It's Sunday, August 14th, 2016, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today we're joined by one of our mentors, Stuart Moore, Head of Product over at Cloud House. He's going to lead a talk on Product Manager, transitioning environments from startup to enterprise. So for those of you maybe joining us for the first time today, let me just briefly explain the format. This is brought to you by the Product Mentor Program. So we have mentors and mentees all around the world. They get paired up for a period of 6 months, making better products, better decisions, and better product people. And so the people you see along the bottom of your screen are mentors and mentees within the current session of the Product Mentor Program. But we also open this up to everyone else, so that anyone who's in the program, didn't make it into the program, someday may be in the program, can participate. And so what we're going to just briefly do is just go around the room, let everyone introduce themselves, say a little bit about themselves, whether or not they're a mentor or a mentee in the current program, and then I'll do a little bit more talking, a little bit more intros before we get fully started. So let me start with Cornell.
Sorry, mute button, it's far away. My name is Cornell Pineda. I'm a current mentee, and I'm a product owner based in New York City.
Excellent. And Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Waite. I am a mentee, and I am a product manager at Town Square Media.
And Stuart, if you just say a little bit about yourself, and then I'll do a few more intros before we get fully started.
Sure. Hi, Jeremy. Hi, folks. My name's Stuart Moore. I'm Head of Product at Cloud House, and I'm looking forward to doing today's talk. And I'm a mentor in the Product Mentors program. Thank you.
Excellent. And I am Jeremy Horn, also known as the Product Guy, and I'll be moderating today. So as the questions come in, as long as they're topically relevant, I'll find a really good time in the very near real time to jump in and have Stuart know about them and so that he can answer them. The more generic questions like, why are we all here? Who is product management? That type of stuff I'll save till the end of the talk. The more generic sorts of questions there. But again, just post all your questions to theproductmentor.com/live, and I will keep them flowing in. But with all that said, let me hand it over to Stuart to take it away.
Thanks, Jeremy. So today I'll be talking about making the move really from working in a startup to maybe working in one of Silicon Valley's very large companies, multi-billion companies, like perhaps VMware, Citrix, Microsoft, so the large giants who would typically have very many products and very large teams. In terms of my background, I've got about 8 years product management experience. 5 of those years I spent in startups as a product manager, and 3 years I spent working as a product manager at Citrix. And when Jeremy kind of asked me to pick a topic for this session, I kind of really thought back about kind of my career where I'd predominantly worked in startups or companies where there was 100, 150 people. You spent any time there and you got to know pretty much everyone. And kind of really the journey I went through making the move to Citrix, which had 8,500 people at the time I joined, a huge number of products. The product I went to work on, Zenap, was about $1 billion in revenue, which is very sizable and a huge responsibility. But you're part of a team of product managers, which is I think something that's quite unique when you make the move from startups, where you're perhaps one or two, maybe 3 at most, whereas you make a move to a large company and suddenly you may find you're part of a team. So there's a great opportunity to learn. And I think it wouldn't surprise you to learn that scale is obviously one of the things that will impact you most when you make the change. It was certainly one of the things that I thought a lot about before I joined. But I think the opportunity to learn from a peer group, I think try and see things from a different perspective and do product management at scale with some of the things that really kind of excited me. And you often see on job descriptions, hey, looking for 5 years doing product management, or 4 years as a developer. What does that really mean if all those years are doing the same thing? What you have really one experience for doing it for a long period of time. So, I think by that measure, the more varied you can make your career, and the more experiences you can learn, the better. Really, it's like a developer. When you interview or meet developers, they haven't necessarily worked on one product. They maybe worked on a series of products. So I think the opportunity as a product manager is really quite important. So you can follow me on @StuMoore on Twitter. I generally chat about product management related things or things in the end user computing space, which is kind of where my product fits. I'm welcome to accept invites on LinkedIn. Please just prefix or mention the mentor program in your invite. The number of spam invites on LinkedIn seems to have increased dramatically over the years, so it'll help me obviously not ignore you if you do send me an invite. So let's make a start. Throughout the agenda, really, I'm going to kind of introduce some kind of personas, a couple of product managers. They're really a blend of some of the experiences that I've had working as a product manager in startups and at Citrix, and some of the people that I've met along the ways. I've kind of created these kind of two hybrid characters. We'll talk through some of the challenges that you would experience as you move into a very large company, having come from a startup. At this point, I might be sounding a bit kind of in a way off-putting, maybe, and this is not my intention. And certainly, hopefully, by the time we've concluded some of the strategies for success and talked a bit about, it is all worthwhile. I would certainly urge you to give it some serious consideration if you have only worked in small companies. So let's meet Lisa. She's kind of like a product manager in a startup. Typically most startups will have one product. Maybe they've got a companion product or component or something like that is kind of really separate from the main core offering, but it kind of supports it, complements it. It's unlikely that you would have a second product that is significantly different to the first. Most startups will typically have many developers in a single location, maybe have a few remote contractors, or maybe you work closely with an outsourcing company, or someone who just provides a bit of extra capacity. So generally, number of locations is low. Offices, maybe your development's done in London, or maybe it's in San Francisco. You're kind of looking to break into the US. I would say that actually, if you haven't guessed already, I'm from the UK. So typically the companies I've worked for have been trying to reach out and move into the US. Obviously, if you're a US based product manager, you've got a very large market to tackle without having to come to the UK. That said, if you were launching a financial product, outside of New York, London is one of the biggest stock exchanges in the world. So it would be prudent to maybe have offices here in the UK. 80% of your meetings are probably face-to-face, and here I'm kind of referring to kind of internal meetings with engineering, with sales, marketing. Everyone's kind of generally in one place, and you've probably got customers in a couple of geos. Maybe it's EMEA and the US, or maybe it's kind of US and maybe Asia Pacific, depending on your product line. So hopefully those kind of things kind of ring true with you out there. John, on the other hand, he kind of works for a very large company, multi-billion-dollar, established company. Whether you're talking like the Googles or the Microsofts of this world, or VMware, Citrix, they've got tens of products, right? They tend to go after very different areas, whether the consumer, enterprise. They have typically grown through acquisition, so they've acquired many products along the way. They've probably got developers in 3 countries, maybe 4. It depends how they've retained the companies that they've acquired. Many companies like Citrix have been great at keeping local teams. When they've acquired the companies, the engineers have stayed on. That was one of the things that impressed me about Citrix. Was they've got 4 or 5 companies that they've bought in the UK to build their products, and they are all here pretty much in one shape or form as they are today. However, on the flip side, the majority of your meetings will be virtual. It's pretty hard to get through the day without spending hours in GoToMeeting or kind of related sort of products like Google Hangouts. And you're spanning multiple time zones. You've got those challenges. It's hard enough balancing US with the UK, but imagine if you're trying to fit India or kind of other parts of Europe or kind of Australia into the mix. It can become very challenging. Obviously, these companies have to have presence in all geos, and so you can really kind of get a sense of scale and challenges that you would come up against. So, as I've kind of already hinted, it is all about scale. It doesn't take much to think about, when you're talking about going from 100 people to 8,000 people, the kind of challenges that you might face. But perhaps one that you might not immediately kind of think about is how your product that you might be product manager for suddenly relates to other products that exist within the company. Now, for the set of products that are very related, they probably actually fall under one umbrella, and that's where you, as a product manager, get a chance to work as part of a team. The Zenap product line, whilst thought of externally in terms of marketing as one product, actually was made up of like 5 or 6 related products. Some of those had been acquired, some built. They serve different purposes, different use cases. However, they're obviously all expected to work together. They're designed together. They're released very often together, maybe slightly different kind of release cadences, but they're thought of as one product, one revenue line. As I said, it's half a billion in terms of licensing and software, and then $500 million in terms of services and renewal and maintenance. That's a sizable product. However, that Zenap product, in the context of Citrix, had to work with their hypervisor, their cloud platform products, networking products, and for a customer, they expect products to work together. They don't care that you've maybe acquired the company or the product a week ago or a year ago. They may not even be aware that product acquisition happened, right? They just see a new product within the portfolio. They expect it to work together. Now, in the consumer world, consumers expect products to interoperate and work together. And there is a difference between thinking about things just working together and being designed to work and have workflows that are in common, UIs that are in common. And suddenly you find that all these challenges in terms of aligning your product with related products that sit within your portfolio becomes really important. And there's nothing worse than when one product group, their priorities, strategies change. So you've really got to be able to keep a finger on the pulse throughout the organization. And we'll talk more about that in the some of the strategies for success later. Communication, the more nodes there are, or the more people, the more challenging it becomes. Now, in a startup, where you are pretty much in the loop, or talking to kind of everyone in the office, whether it's at the water cooler, whether it's in meetings, just walking around the office. You get to talk to everyone, and if there are mistakes in communication, or how when you're presenting your plans or your strategies, your ideas, if things aren't received well, you've got the opportunity to take a step back, go and address it, come and talk to them, and fix those kind of things. It's easier to manage on a micro scale. If you are talking and presenting at kind of like the town hall or the all hands meeting where you're briefing hundreds of engineers, you kind of got to get it right first time. Getting it wrong and then trying to undo that is really challenging. So you've really got to think about how you can approach the job in a way that makes sure that you remove those challenges and get it right. And we'll talk more about that later, but it is definitely harder to overcome the inertia of things being wrong or misinterpreted than it is to get it right. You have less leeway in the larger organization because things can just remain, perpetuate. There's word of mouth. People weren't there at the meeting, they hear it secondhand, it's their interpretation. Now, all those things happen within smaller companies, but it's easier to manage and resolve those than it is when you're talking hundreds of people. So one of the important things, I think, design is really at the forefront today, and you may be wondering why I've picked the Dyson vacuum cleaner. I nearly said the Dyson Hoover, but yeah, it's a vacuum cleaner. And whenever I'm asked to think about design, you get asked those questions when you meet designers in large companies or maybe in interviews and stuff like that. Whether you work with them, I've always thought about design really enhances form and function, and I think that's pretty clear when you look at something that essentially just sucks dirt, right? It can be made to be beautiful, but actually, the other part of it is you can see it doing its job, right? You can see it sucking up the dirt into the collector. There's no silly bag to mess with on those days. And the guy Dyson is clearly obsessed over detail, and he's made something that 20 years ago no one would actually buy a product like that because of how it looked like. He really kind of changed the game and upped the bar. And if you see some of his early prototypes, they sucked. I mean, visually, their design wasn't there, but you could tell he was working towards every iteration of this. Now, when you're building products in larger companies, you're not necessarily working with massive teams. So the size of the team is probably no different than when you're working in a small organization. Obviously, you might work with multiple teams who are all building different features. But there's essentially there's the product architect, there's maybe the designer, there's maybe someone involved from IX, information or user experience, and some of the developers, right? The numbers haven't really changed, but really what you have to remember is that they have their team's priorities and their goals, and they're working probably on multiple projects. Whether those multiple projects are all across your product or whether they're across different or related products, you have to remember that they, as a team, as a resource, may be allocated and thinking about particular things about how ensuring there's a consistent experience through all the company's products. And it's really important not to get drawn down to the lowest common denominator. Why is this? Well, we ought to make our products easy, intuitive to use, but you have to remember that relative to what is the important thing, right? If your product is being used to manage complexity by an administrator in their environment, then actually how far can you go to simplify it? When you're looking at some things like consumer products, the Hoover, the Dyson does one thing, right? Your product may do just one thing. That's kind of why apps for mobile devices have been so successful. They do one thing generally, and they do it really, really well, and you can obsess over the design. For people like myself who work for products that kind of fit into enterprise administrators to do their job, they have to manage complexity, and you've got to be really careful that what kind of gets heard at the top level of the company about your products are complicated, we need to simplify them, gets kind of filtered down, and suddenly it's like, we've got to simplify the product. Well, if you simplify something to the point that someone can't do their job, then you can fail in that regard as well. So bear these sort of things in mind. So legal and compliance, this is perhaps something that you don't think much about in a startup. It's not to say that you're disregarding and doing illegal things. It's more about, once you're a public company, you have, the company has huge responsibilities to shareholders, how it publishes its accounts, and perhaps the most important thing that impacts the way that things are sold and money is recognized. Now, this rings true in smaller companies, but when you're in larger companies, they really take these things seriously. They've got huge departments that worry about these things, and if you're promising something, or the salespeople are promising something, and they close the deal, they can't recognize that money until that thing that has been promised has been delivered. So you really have to be careful about how you talk about the roadmap. And you can have all the disclaimers, flashing neon lights on the presentation going, warning, we have the right and reserve the right to change our minds, change our roadmap, and do whatever we like. The listener, the customer, hears what they hear. If they latch on to something in how you talk about your roadmap or what's been delivered, and the sales guy is kind of following up, and these companies will partition, and they'll say, the product manager gives the roadmap and owns the roadmap. It's trying to keep kept separate from sales, and they will have to have processes in place that ensure that that is the case. And so so is there a question?
Yeah. So we have a question. I'm going to throw over to Jessica to ask her question.
My question. Do you find working with more teams versus more designers, like at the scale level, do you feel like the messaging can get lost since they only own like a part? So yeah, they might be working together for like the initial ideation together, but like as soon as they actually have to like own their own part, scale-wise, do you run into more complications that way at a larger company?
Yes, in some regard. I think it's really important. One of the things you have to be able to do is delegate. I think there's so many competing things on your time that if you try and be involved in every step of the way and every meeting, you will just fail, right? Not because you're doing the wrong thing, but you won't get everything done, right? You'll either spend 90 hours a week and you'll burn out and you'll be a shriveling mess, or you will just drop the ball on so many other things. So I think it's really important to make sure that everyone understands why you're doing something, what the vision is, where the product is going, and get people to parrot it back to you when you're once you've said your piece, to make sure that they've kind of really understood it and they've not kind of inferred something different. And at certain points, you have to kind of let the teams go off and deliver the features with the designers, and kind of trust people to be able to do what they're good at. You will then find that you typically resolve or get pulled into resolving the conflict that inevitably comes up. That the designers want one thing, product teams, engineering teams are going, we can't build it like that because how things work at the back end, or we can't do this because of X, right? And the poor designer's going, I just want to make it simple. I want to make this flow, and I'll talk a bit more about this later in terms of some of the strategies. But yeah, getting the customer or getting people to hear the actual originating pain point, whether it's the customer or consultants pull them in, that can help get engineers or designers over their mental barrier of what they believe the problem is.
Okay, great. So that's all the questions we have right now. Keep them coming in to the productmentor.com/live. And with that said, back to you, Stuart.
Cool. Thanks, Jeremy. So you have to kind of expect that there may be some approvals process around getting the roadmap approved. You may also be asked to sign in blood various statements about how you will talk about the roadmap or how you will disclose and discuss things, and how you'll follow certain systems. It is a pain, but actually it's a very important thing, and as long as you follow that process, it's there to protect you as well. There's nothing worse than people promising things that can't be delivered. So so let's look at some of the strategies for success. I mean, I think in the precursor to communicating to large numbers of people, whether those large numbers of people are internal teams or your customer, right? It's always a good idea to test your ideas, get some feedback from select groups. Obviously, if you think about getting it wrong to your customer, that message is broadcast to thousands or even millions of people, right? If you're about to, take your communication message of some new product roadmap or strategy within internal engineering teams, making sure that you've run it past a select group of architects or engineers really helps make sure that you get the messaging right. It perhaps becomes more challenging when you're looking at the field customer-facing roles within the organization. You may have less of a fewer chances to work with them, because quite often larger companies have field readiness teams. They will be the ones that will actually communicate that message. So they're the ones that you actually want to work with and refine the messaging of how things go out to them. And they will be able to give you good feedback about what works and what doesn't work. Challenge assumptions. Now,
So before you jump too much into that, we've got another question. This one from Furqan Hamid, one of our mentees. He's just not in the room at the moment. And his question is, how to scale the rapid prototyping? When you're small, you can experiment a lot. When you become big, the startup culture fades away. How do you scale the experiments?
So yeah, that is difficult. I think where you have the biggest challenge is obviously it really depends on the release frequency of now in larger companies where your roadmap is tied to other products. Sometimes the release frequency may not be high, right? So one of the things that I kicked off when I was at Citrix was really doing design workshops, bringing customers in and testing the ideas in small groups. We picked kind of very large prominent accounts and some smaller ones, and we tested things, the prototypes, whether it was design workflows, whether it was concepts, with kind of small select groups, and you can get a very good feeling. And we used the consultants and the sales engineers in that process as well. So you have to do lots of little groups, and hopefully you kind of hear the same thing back. You maybe can't do some of the more kind of lean experiments that perhaps you read a lot about, unless you've got a SaaS product that you can kind of do stuff and feed it back within the UI.
All right, cool. So we don't have any other questions. Keep them coming in at theproductmentor.com/live. Back to you, Stuart.
Thanks. Cool. So, it's really important when companies have been around for a really long time, you know, whether it's 10.
Hey, Stuart, we're not seeing the slides.
Oh. Yeah. There you go.
There you go.
Thank you. So when, you know, a company's been around for like maybe 10, 15 years, the number of myths build up, or whether you think of them as myths or you know, something else, you know, kind of legends. You know, those kind of things that sort of hang around that never really get dispelled. You've really got to identify those, and as a newcomer to any organisation at any scale, note those things that seem to be said with some kind of like, it's always been that way, it's because of X, right? Write them down, think about them, go, does that make sense? And then if it doesn't, you know, take time to validate them and then try and dispel them. You know, it's very easy to get drawn into discussions about whether or not something is right or wrong in terms of an opinion. I'll give you a good example here. We were looking at doing a tech preview release of the product, get it out to customers, get some feedback. And we heard this, well, you know, we can't do that, you know, it's going to take a huge amount of time. And I was like, why is it going to take more time to do this tech preview release? You know, we just close it down to a level of functionality, quality, hand it out to the customer, you know, select customers, obviously, they have to be on software maintenance and assurance so that they are entitled to it. And they were like, yeah, well, we'll have to change this, we'll have to change that. And, you know, it takes all this time to. And I was like, no, you can go out with the same name, you can go out with the same version. And they're, oh, no, legal and revenue recognitions teams won't like that. I was like, you could either walk away and think, okay, we can't do that, or you get the team to do twice as much work, or you just go off and you validate. You phone up legal, you phone up them and say, is this the case? And they go, oh no, as long as you provide some documentation and some statements to the fact that these features of functionality that are available in the tech preview aren't necessarily guaranteed to be available in the next release, we're fine. You don't have to change the version number, don't have to change the name or anything like that. So it's very easy for myths to get perpetuated over time. You know, what may have been true 10 years ago or 5 years ago doesn't necessarily hold true, but the organization builds up a certain amount of memory about what happened or why things happened. And it's really important to keep challenging those assumptions over time. And there's no better opportunity to do that when you're new. It's really important to build relationships, whatever scale of job, right? But you know, we very often think about, you know, our product team. When you're working in a very large company, you'll, you know, be obviously naturally drawn to those people that you work with all the time. But as we talked about on the product roadmap slide, when your product fits in or relates to or works with other products, it's really important to keep those people in the loop as well. You know, they have a release cadence, they have a product strategy and vision. How much it overlaps with your product is really important to understand. And sometimes, you know, products may wax and wane within a very large company. They may have been around for a long time. They may have felt kind of pushed to one side. They may not have been as important as the day they were acquired. Or maybe other factors in the market have kind of changed or shaped the dynamics. So, you know, keeping those people in the loop about your plans, building the relationship and understanding about what their challenges are, what they're doing, keeping them informed about what your product is doing is really important. Otherwise, you can find yourself caught out when a product team decides, hey, look, in order to become more relevant or more important, we're going to do X. We're going to become part of this product or vision or strategy, and that can then cause you challenges. I'll give you a very good example, although I've got to be careful about saying too much. You know, the Zen Server team were a part of Citrix. They had a they were really relevant for particular small to medium-sized businesses running the Zenap product, and but they were no way near the kind of the vSphere Microsoft hypervisor in terms of market penetration, and it was never the intent that that would be the case. Now they started thinking, what if we align with the cloud platform product, which is a orchestration layer for these hypervisors. They could have gone down a very different path. Now, actually, by bringing them in the fold and making them feel more relevant, we actually helped prevent them go down somewhere that ultimately 9 months ago Citrix sold off cloud platform, which would have really have taken Zen Server completely out of the picture. And by keeping them relevant and keeping them on target of how they fitted into the Zenap product vision and the Netscaler product vision, we ultimately saved them from doing something. Now, if we hadn't have established those relationships where they kept us informed of what they were doing and we kept them informed about what we were doing, they could very easily have drifted off. Finding a Sherpa, I think a guide when you join somewhere really big is really important. I was fortunate that my boss had been at Citrix for 14 years. He'd worked on a series of products. He really knew the landscape really well. He knew just about every SE and consultant. But whether it's him, whether it's your boss, or whether it's some other architect, you can generally hear who is well regarded and valued within an organization when you join, and getting someone to help you navigate the landscape of who does what, how things get done, who makes decisions, what and why are behind those decisions is really important. It's easier to get a sense of all that dynamic in a small company. There are very often people that influence how things happen without you being aware of who is making the call. And I think getting someone to explain what part of the job, how things get done, is really essential to your success. It can save you doing a lot of things, and it can also help you uncover some of the perhaps in the early days, where you haven't got sort of a full understanding of the product. It can help you identify some quick wins, which are really important for kind of establishing credibility. Whether it's something small that just niggles the field and sales teams or the sales engineers, maybe it's a lack of documentation around certain specific things. These are things that you can solve without with good cross-domain product management experience without necessarily knowing the product in any depth. Whilst I don't have any direct experience of working for a startup that has been fortunate enough to be acquired, I've met a few product managers over the years that have been, and it's been interesting kind of chatting to them about what tends to change. Obviously, I think probably the most noticeable thing is the product roadmap impact. Whilst you might have, right, we're going to be doing these features next, and this is what the customer needs, all of a sudden you have to integrate that product as to become like the acquiring company's brand. Licensing mechanisms have to be built in, kind of various reporting engines or whatever. Maybe it's even the UI and the look and feel. So all these things can suddenly change how and when you were going to do some things that you need to deliver for your customers. And it's worth pointing out that how that happens varies from different companies to different companies. The varying kind of different models of integration. Companies like Cisco have a very fast kind of, they acquire the company, they assimilate it into the organization, they kind of apply processes, they induction. They get that part of that new company part of Cisco as quickly as possible. And there's lots of kind of case studies on the internet, and they're kind of worth reading. Other companies have another approach, which is kind of like for the first 12 months, they allow the company to keep doing what they were doing, right? And they recognize that they know their product, they know their market very well, and it's like on them to kind of start trying to integrate into the organization. And obviously that kind of all happens at the system level and the processes, but they allow them to keep control of the product, but they do kind of set okay, in 12 to 18 months time, you've got to have assimilated in terms of branding and licensing and this system integration. Now, I think that's all that's worth saying at this stage, but the other obvious thing that has to happen is the sales and marketing teams of the company may not actually be aware of the company that has been acquired, right? They are maybe less familiar. Maybe the company was a partner, and that partner may or may not have had a certain level of visibility throughout the organization prior to the acquisition. But yeah, you're certainly going to have to educate people on what the benefits are of the product, why it's relevant to the acquiring company or the core product that's on offer.
So we have another question that just came in from Fuquan, and he's asking, let's see, when you are the one to acquire, when you are the one to acquire a product or company, what should be your top priorities in terms of challenges? For example, you need to let them know what your plans are.
So, yeah, so I mean, again, it's perhaps hard to talk to not having made the decision to acquire a company. I'll maybe answer that one in 10 years' time. But no, I mean, joking aside, I think when the company acquires a product or company, the onus is on them to explain how the product that's being acquired or the company that's being acquired fits into the vision, the strategies, the roadmap of the acquiring company. The speed with which they do that obviously varies, and I spoke a bit about that. But I think the more the company does that, the better job they do that, the easier it will be for the company that's being acquired to make the right decisions and to assimilate well, right? Otherwise, you can be very much felt that you're kind of drifting in this sea, and you don't quite know what the objective is, and it's if the companies do it well, then there's a clear vision and strategy there.
All right. So as we are approaching the end of the talk, get your final questions in to theproductmentor.com/live, and back to you, Stuart.
Thanks. So building a virtual team, I think this is really important. As I said earlier, in response to one of the questions, you can't do everything. You have to be able to delegate. But being able to spot people who can get stuff done for you is really important. I mean, they might be parts of other teams. People always want to kind of stretch themselves in their job, do things outside of the thing that they do every day. Maybe they got designs on becoming something different to what they currently do. In larger companies, you tend to have far more defined job roles. So giving people the opportunity to do something really different, is something that helps that individual, and obviously it helps you get stuff done. Obviously, you've got to be careful. You've got to make sure that if you're asking them to do something that isn't their normal responsibility, get their boss involved. But equally, when they've helped you, you've got to recognise that contribution, not just to their boss, but to your boss, right? Let them know that these people have helped you get something done, right? And the more you can explain the vision and why you want to get stuff done, the more likely that they are and willing to help you. And as I alluded to earlier, influencers can save you a lot of time. In the technical teams, it will probably be the architect, or the senior engineers who've been there a long time. They have like maybe the ear of the VP of engineering, and getting them on side and helping you get some of the more skeptical engineers on board with some plans or approaches. It's really essential. When you start looking at kind of the field teams, job role is less of an indicator, but you spend any amount of time talking to the VP of sales or the guy who runs the commercial teams. He will just volunteer like the names of people that he obviously regards as kind of like his go-to guys, right? The people he always trusts that have got the word and the understanding of the customer, and you just got to pick up on who those people are, and then talk to them, get them on board with your ideas, your plans, or your solutions, right? When you're trying to validate a solution with the commercial teams, making sure that you've understood the needs of the customer or their needs and their problems. You might have the engineers might have come up with a different solution to the one they envisaged. If they don't get on board with that, they can easily derail your plans. So, at least making sure that you've gone to them and said, look, I know you were thinking about X, the team have solved it by doing Y, that meets your needs. They'll be on board, and they won't. There's no opportunity. There's no reason for them to derail. Or when the VP suddenly goes, hey, I know Dan was banging on about this problem, and you're talking about solving it like Y. You can say, well, we've been through it with Dan. He's on board with this. He had a different solution in mind, but we've explained that our solution approaches and solves the same problem. You'll save the day, and you'll save yourself a lot of time. So just kind of wrapping up, you've really got to use your strengths as a product manager who's come from, you've probably done a far more varied job in a startup than a product manager that spent 4 or 5 years within a very large company. Why is that? As I spoke about earlier, the job roles of a far narrower scope. You've got everything from release management, product marketing, technical marketing, compete analysis. You might have product management. You've got the architect. Yes, there's people doing just about every role, right? In a startup where you're a product manager, you're probably doing the release management. You're probably doing maybe some element of project management. You're doing some marketing. You're doing some tech marketing. You're doing a bit of everything. That really gives you a couple of things. Not just the broad breadth of being able to do the job, but it actually gives you some empathy for the people that you're dealing with who are now doing that job, right, within the large company. And if you understand their challenges, you'll be able to actually prioritize, helping them out and getting some of the problems solved for them. Be prepared to take some risks. I think you will naturally find large companies that have been around for a long time slightly more risk averse. Now, I'm not saying by taking risks just go ahead and just do stuff without talking. I'm saying you be prepared to take the riskier strategy, but communicate how you're going to mitigate those risks. That generally is a good approach to getting people through some of the problem. What typically happens when companies become risk averse is people don't even voice risky ideas or challenging or new ideas. They just stick with the status quo. Come in there, be prepared to suggest different ways of doing stuff, but accept that you will probably meet resistance. So in light of that, plan and go, here's why it's not risky. Here's what we can do to solve this problem. And just do things differently, right? Think differently. You've got the opportunity to shake things up a bit because there's a certain amount of just things always being done that way. Whether you're new coming into a small company or a big company, you've got the opportunity to say, hey, look, we can solve this problem differently. Just be careful of not ruffling feathers, pointing fingers at that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. That will just get people's backs up. But just look at proposing different solutions to the problem that probably keeps coming up time and time again.
We have a question from Cornell. I'll hand it over to you, Cornell.
I think Stuart just highlighted a couple of answers already, but I'll ask anyway. Stuart, so in a startup you mentioned that as a product manager you do wear a lot of hats, you're more involved. Would you say typically when you join a larger enterprise, your role and your hands getting dirty kind of gets diminished, or it's handled by other people? And what if you do enjoy wearing all of those hats and being more proactive? How would you approach that?
So that's a great question. Actually, some of the things that you can kind of let go of the things that you like least in the job. Like, I mean, I used to do a lot of release management activities when I was a product manager in my first startup that I worked in, and those things are time consuming. They're not particularly sort of the bit about product management that I really enjoyed. So when I went to Citrix and there was a person assigned to the release and their title was release manager, they took care of all those things, like running the meetings, taking notes, chasing up teams, making sure that they were delivering on time, escalating issues, and so all that kind of thing freed up my time to do more of the stuff that I wanted to do, like talk to customers, talk to the sales teams, talk to consultants and stuff. Now, if you enjoy doing that, you can still be involved, and you can take the opportunity to try to shape or drive things in a particular way. But I think actually having the breadth and allows you to then hone in on things that you want to do more of, because you won't have time to do everything, and you've got to pick and choose, like, where can you add the greatest value. And if you've got some go-to guy who's a great release manager, he's keeping a finger on every pulse and everything that's supposed to be happening, you can worry less about that, and you can spend more time doing, getting involved in the design, right? If you want to be more hands-on design, you can do that. There's going to be a designer, there's going to be an engineer. You can get involved at the start, and you can keep going all the way through to completion. It really gives you, I think, more opportunity to do more of the stuff you love, as long as you don't let stuff go and it's not being done, right? If there's no one there to do it, you still have to own and have responsibility for that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent.
Great. So yeah, no other questions, and back to you, Stuart.
Perfect time, because this is my last slide. So I hope I haven't put anyone off. It is definitely worthwhile. I think, on reflection, I wish I'd perhaps made the move to a company like Citrix sooner. I think the opportunity to do things differently, do product management differently, learn from other product managers, see the things that they do well, the things that can really help build your experience. Obviously, there's without doubt a good opportunity to build your professional network, build your reputation and credibility for working at a large company. They're all great things, but and whether it's you get the opportunity to present at major conferences and things like that, there's some of the little things that it's a big deal when you perhaps maybe work at a startup and it's not a massive company and you don't have those kind of opportunities to talk in front of hundreds of people, right? I won't forget the day that I had to do my first presentation at Citrix's major conference, right? And there was stuck in a room of 300 people. that was a great opportunity, and you learn a lot from doing that. And I think if you're always working in startups, you're always kind of doing the same things. The same way as if you always work in a large company, right? You're always used to people doing stuff for you, right? You don't get necessarily the breadth to learn, and that's why sometimes, when product managers who've maybe been very successful in very large companies make the move to startups, they may struggle because they assume that there's going to be someone there to do each of the jobs, right? Probably the most important thing, and in retrospect, I kind of wonder why maybe I should have had a whole slide dedicated. You've really got to prioritize your time, and I've talked a bit about this throughout the session, but making sure that you focus on the things that are important, getting the right things done is essential. It's very easy to get sucked into endless meetings, spend your time doing email, right? But that's kind of true of any small job. And I think when I was looking back at this selection of slides that I had and the graphics, and I looked at John, and he's sat there, and he's, and I've kind of portrayed this like, he's at scale, it's really busy, and he's sitting there like that, and I'm like, have I picked the right picture? And then I thought, well, actually, in any job as a product manager, you've got to sit back and make sure that you think about what's got to be done, reflect on stuff. If you're constantly in the responding to the now, you'll really struggle. Every morning come in, go through your priority list, go, do I need to do that? Do I need to do that? Should I do that before I read my email? Why? Once you start reading email, you'll get distracted, and before you know it, an hour can have gone by trying to keep up from yesterday's email that came in from the US or from the UK, depending where you are, right? So there are times where you've got to prioritize stuff and say, actually, I've got to come in, I've got to spend the next 2 hours or an hour working on this, right? Because it's due. Whether it's a tactical thing, a strategic thing, you've got to be in control of where your time gets spent. So having people that can help you do those things, as we talked about, your cross-functional team, it's really important, and that can enable you to prioritize your time. So, just go for it. Thank you very much for your time, and hope this has been a informative session. Thanks, Jeremy.
Awesome. Thank you to you also, Stuart, Head of Product over at Cloud House, for today's discussion on transitioning environments from startup to enterprise for the product manager. And as always, the presentation will be posted on our SlideShare channel. And thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, a.k.a. the Product Guy, and to everyone else who joined us today on the Product Mentor. And don't forget, if you're interested in being a product mentor just like Stuart to product people of all sorts, visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today. Session 6 starts January 8th, and we're looking to get a lot of product mentors signed up between now and then. And also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit our very own free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. With all that said, I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.